I think this might be it, right, Tina? Roger and Aaron can't make it tonight.
Correct.
Okay,
So,
I just started well, stream is starting right now.
okay. All right. So, as usual, we'll start with the pledge. So, I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the
to the
flag
flag
of the
of the
United
United
States of
States of
America
America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
liberty,
justice for all.
justice for all.
Okay. So, all right. First thing we want to talk about is the survey. Tina, I told them not to be too complimentary. We don't want you to get out of control here. So
Such a great job.
the surveys look great.
Yeah.
And the thing we want to do is, does anybody have any other comments? Tina, Mary Hendrick had a couple of helpful. She's really good at that, having her look at stuff at the end. So you got all of her stuff,
Yes, I did.
and you agreed with it?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Yeah, I think so
Unless
too.
anybody-
So tomorrow we got to get it up, right? I forgot to send out I was going to send out the message I wrote to the advertiser. But after this meeting, I'll send it out. Basically, just explaining what this is, telling people to go to the town website to fill out the survey. And I think I struck the right balance of, this is, we want participation, but, we're not out for blood here. And, excuse me. So one of the things we got to do, Tina, are you clear how we get this online?
Yeah, you're just gonna post that same link that I sent out to you and people will click on that Google link.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do that. The other thing we wanted to do was discuss a blurb. What we're going to do is advertise it on the town website. We'll advertise it on the Facebook page, on the town Facebook page, on the community and rec Facebook page. But Tina had a good idea of like doing those one at a time, but doing them one at a time with the same blurb on each, so the instructions aren't all over the place. And I really, Tina, look after we talked this morning, looking at the intro to the community survey, I really think that maybe we put New York State in, but as part of the New York State Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative, the town of East Greenbush invites you to take this community survey on public safety and law enforcement. It will take approximately 10 minutes of your time and is completely confidential. Your participation will help our town improve its services, processes, and connections to the community. I think that might do it. If anybody can think of ways to sharpen that up.
Are we going to keep in a section about it being designed for the East Greenbush residents?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the next
or
part.
Individuals who work or
Yeah.
operate, because that was where we're trying to draw our data from.
No, that's right. That's a good point. So that we just finished that first paragraph
Right.
of the instructions on the community survey.
I mean, that's, obviously we can't ensure it's going to be, but it'll hopefully people will follow the instructions and majority will.
And that's why we were thinking not to advertise it on the police Facebook page.
Right.
Because there are so many people who follow that, but so many of them are, law enforcement people from other communities, Brittany Kilcher, the people I don't want to hear from. No, but I think there's an awful lot of town residents who follow that Facebook page, but there's also a lot of other people.
We have people from across the states, actually, if you sit down and go through them, that are not actually even local to New York, let alone East Greenbush.
Yeah, I was looking at the community survey we did for the comprehensive plan, and 85% of the respondents were from East Greenbush and 15% were from somewhere else. Now, that could be people who used to live here, who grew up here, but I think we keep it off the Facebook page. So we put it up, we advertise it. All I wrote in the advertiser is, this is what we're doing. This is what the governor's executive order, blah, blah, blah. I was very clear that this is not part of defund the police or, some kind of, I forget how I worded, I'll send it out to you. And the idea was we want to get people's opinions. We want to improve services if we can. But we also want to take the community's temperature. And because I think many, if not most of the people who read that message in the advertiser would be pro EGPD to begin with. So, but I do think the survey's really good. I think that the way we worked on it last week was really effective. And Tina, all kidding aside, thank you. You did great. You really did. And the police survey, what we'll do is email it to the police department, right?
If you want to, I can copy the link and we can send an email out tomorrow.
Yeah. And I was thinking of calling Nick Peter and just kind of having a couple minute chat where I reassure him that there's no identifiers in here, and we're not looking for individual response. We're not looking at individual responses. We're looking for the aggregate, and I think it's really. Tina and I talked about this. It really is to the police department's benefit for the police to fill that survey out. I think this whole exercise improves dramatically if we know what they're thinking, and particularly, seeing what the patterns are in police department response, because that also, I think with the surgery we did on it last week, that's a good survey too. So I think as the first products of this group, the surveys are excellent, and I think. It's like David Turpinning said last week when he came in that he really thought it was a productive discussion. And David is not above sharing his thoughts, pro or con, but he gives credit when credit is due. And I agreed with him. I thought that was a very helpful conversation. I think it's a good group.
Are we
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we going to include a turnaround, a drop dead date for the return?
Yes, that's a great point. We got to do that. What's the comp plan one was on for 4 months. We can't do that. But what are you guys thinking? Maria, what do you think?
Well, is your message in the advertiser this Thursday or next Thursday, Jack?
This Thursday.
It's this Thursday, and it could be online as soon as tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people are prone to either do something or not do something. Personally, I mean, I don't think people let things like that linger. If they're interested enough, they'll probably hook in pretty quickly and complete it. That's my thought. And it would be great if we had the results to inform the rest. We had some time to be able to collate the results so they can inform some of this work. If we haven't hit upon, hopefully we'll bring up some things that, we didn't think we needed to look at that. And it turns out that we do, right? So I would, 2-3 weeks is.
Well, how about February 5th is the end of 3 weeks. I mean, from the end of this week is the 15th. Then there's the 22nd, the 29th, and February 5th. So that would be 3 weeks and the rest of this week. 3 weeks and 3 days.
That's okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fine. If you want me to share my screen, I can show you what the results look like and how I can check them. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay, so here is the survey. So at the top, can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so at the top, you toggle over to here, and this is the actual survey and the questions. And then the responses is just a different tab. So you can see we had 4 fake respondents, which I'll clear out after we're done. And here's the responses. It's automatically put into these pie charts and
nice.
graphs.
Nice.
Yeah. And then we can export it into an Excel sheet because I'll have to do the disaggregation by gender or whatever demographic. If we want to do a demographic of race or age, I'll just have to do that with Excel. But as you can see, I can check the response rate anytime.
Great.
Tina, is that on Google?
Yes.
Good, good.
Yes, it is on Google, so I can check it anytime. So, I mean, I think if we do an aggressive campaign to encourage people to complete this, that we can shorten that time up, and you know, we can stay on top of what the response rate looks like.
Yeah. And, you know, if we get to February 5th, say, and all of a sudden it's taken off and a lot of people are filling it out the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we could extend it if we want, if we think that'll help. But I agree that I agree with Maria, most people will, if they're going to connect with it, will connect early and fill it out. I think up front, the first week or 10 days will be the most responses. So is February 5th okay with everyone? Okay. All right. So we'll do that. And Maria, you're right.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I think that's more than ample time. And I think, to your point though, Jack, I think if we keep our deadline, we keep our deadline. Because otherwise then somebody else says, oh, well, you know what, I just saw it today. I'm sorry, I was on vacation, you know, and then we're next thing you know, we're in the mid-February.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
That's just 2 cents. So
no, I think that's right.
you know.
All right. The next thing I want to talk about are policies. And I gave the chief a slight warning about this. But one of the things I sent out, everybody should have policy 401, bias-based policing. And what I want to ask the chief and assistant chief here is if they could kind of describe the life history of a policy like this. Where does it come from? How does it get enshrined in this format? How are the officers taught what this is? And then how is it reviewed? I mean, if somebody has an incident that implicates this policy, is it reviewed with them? What's the quality control on following these policies? So, Chief, if you or John could just start giving us the life history of a policy.
Sure. So I think we touched on it briefly, one of our other meetings, about how they kind of come about a little bit. It's from multiple resources. One is just in-house. If we have perhaps a content expert that is specializes in firearms or defensive tactics, you know, they are going to continue ongoing training and bringing back information of what's, you know, going on with that content per se. So we use that back to best practices. A lot of that relies on that. We also base it on state law, obviously, because we follow the New York State penal law, New York State vehicle and traffic law. So a lot of it's based on input from that, as well as some federal statutes and case laws that come about. We also meet as a shared services team with our shared services chiefs panel, because a lot of these policies overlap into each agency because we do a lot of things together. So the chiefs panel will convene. We'll utilize our training coordinators, who, in our case, we're very fortunate, is also an accreditation officer. So he is aware of what's going on throughout New York State, also as far as different policies for different departments. So it's kind of, you know, a conglomerate, but we're fortunate now also with Lexipol to not only have all those resources for the development of policies, but also to fall back on attorneys that are vetting these policies out and are we're content experts. Perhaps the one that we deal with is Mike Rinaldi, who has gone from working throughout neighboring jurisdictions here, from police all the way up to chief, who is an attorney and works for Lexipol now, actually. So he's come in regularly. He's taught throughout the academy throughout my whole career as a police officer. In addition to, he has come into our legal updates trainings for a lot of case law and things to that effect. So that's kind of like a little, in a nutshell. I'm just going to throw it to John, though, in case there's anything I forgot as well.
Yeah, you know, case law is big when it comes to policies. I mean, it's really driven by court decisions and things like that. I mean, most policies, I hate to say they're written in stone, but there's not a lot of wiggle room to play with them so much because of the all the things that go into check, kind of checking them and making sure they're in line. You can't violate case law. You can't violate state and federal statutes. You can't, go against accreditation if you're an accredited agency. Otherwise you lose it, so there's all these things that are in place to check it. And, then you look at other agencies around you, you look for the best practices that are going on, you look for what they're doing and try to tweak it for your agency and make sure that it's in compliance with everything. And then, like Chief said, you check with people like Mike Rinaldi, who is, a guru when it comes to this stuff and has a lot of experience from, a patrolman all the way up through the ranks of the police ranks, right up to chief of police. He's a use of force expert and is trained by the Force Science Institute. So he knows that end of things and can, when you run something by him and it comes back with a thumbs up from him, it's been vetted properly.
So does Lexipol have an accreditation? I know it does, but does Lexipol have a series of policies? I mean, why do a bias-based policy? Was that a need that was identified in the department? Is that something that Lexipol has?
That's something that Lexipol has more policies than we are required to have for accreditation purposes.
Right.
There's 109 standards for accreditation. Lexipol, I think at last count, John and I said over 150. Some agencies may choose not to use, perhaps if they don't have a canine program, but they're there for the taking, so to speak. This is a newer policy, my understanding, and they are ever evolving as well, as our policies. Our use of force policy posted on our website has changed several times since it was posted because updates come out and things are changed. The governor's executive order has changed some. So they're always continually changing, which is part of the plus of having Lexipol. We're continually updated on those changes. So bias-based policing, we didn't have one because we didn't have a policy to that effect. So that was one of the first ones we looked at, knowing that changes were coming, that we wanted to make sure we had implemented.
And did you take this wholesale from Lexipol? Do you edit it? What do you?
No, we actually went through this and we did not change anything because when we did our implementation process with our policies and such, we did not have one existing. So we reviewed this. I spoke to some other chiefs about this also that use Lexipol, and we saw that it looked good on its face, but there were some things that in it that we don't have that we're in the process of getting together on, as far as there's an annual report, which we've never had to do before. So we just implemented this. So that's something that we need to discuss and get into place before the end of the year.
And who decides when you're done? Is it you and John? Is it
done?
As far as when we're done with the policy?
Yeah. When is a policy done?
When we feel that we have spoken to all the resources we can, whether there might be a content expert about this. And this is not, like, I can't say I have a content expert off the top of my head for this. Like, I could say there's one for use of force.
Right.
But once we see it, and actually this is a great opportunity to sit and look at this policy because it was something newer to John and I as well.
Okay.
And
And then, yeah.
I'd like to add, the nice thing about this is that as we're talking about this policy, obviously this has come out more so in the last year than any time, but so you'll have entities like Lexipol, you'll have other town attorneys, you'll have other people working with you on your policy to make sure that it is coming up. This is where you get your best practices from. This is where you get your current standards from, is based on what's happening in the world now. So that's kind of, you snickered a little when I said you're never done, but you really are never done.
No, I get that. Yeah.
You're constantly tweaking them. You're constantly revamping them. You're constantly making sure they're in compliance. And if something new comes along, sort of like this governor's mandate, we're now trying to come into compliance with that and make sure that our standards and our policies are in compliance with what everybody expects them to be, and still be able to do our job effectively. So
And
that's
John,
the task.
are there times when one or more of your officers get into a certain situation that yields a kind of information or insights into a policy like this? Would that feed back into the policy?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a for example right now. We have use of force forms that we fill out every time somebody has to use any type of force against somebody, and you know, it came up as to whether or not we include those into the case file or they get kept in a separate file. So retention came up on those things and where they go when you use them. So that was something we had been in contact with Dave Gruenberg about. That's something we talked to the Lexipol attorneys about. And that's something that, you know, we had talked to previously in my previous agency about, and you get some conflicting answers sometimes. So it really is based on, you know, you go based on what your people are telling you to do, because, you know, if the town attorney says, let's do it this way, well, guess who's going to be backing us up if and when that gets challenged? It's the town attorney. So, you know, you don't want to go against that recommendation, but you certainly want to research it. So, you know, things like that now all of a sudden we want to make sure that gets incorporated into our policy so that we make sure that we're retaining those records properly and it goes into our records retention, you know, policy to make sure that it's written in there, things like that. So we're constantly tweaking those policies, you know, and nothing fits into a box, especially in police work. You can never get it to fit all the way perfectly every time. So, you know, we still give our officers leeway to use good judgment and to use, you know, sound police practices to apply, even though it may not be covered in the policy.
Gotcha. So when something like the bias-based policing policy is done, how is it disseminated to the officers? How do they
So
learn?
with so in past, our policies were on a disk available on our shared drive on our computer and also disseminated paper copies to everybody. So, you know, the paper copy ends up here, it ends up here. So with Lexipol, again, we were fortunate that with their program, every time a policy is done, it's disseminated electronically to the officers. So they can get it on their desktop. They can also get it on an app that's available on their phone, which is so user-friendly because we all test ran it before sending it out. And what you have to do is they have to actually acknowledge receipt and reading of the policy before it'll go into their manual, on whether it's on their app or on their desktop. And so this it not only just acknowledges that it gives us the date when it was received. So there's tracking purposes. So if anybody says they never got it, we have, you know, verification that they did receive it. It also will automatically generate any changes or updates that come. Again, what it does, it's nice. It shows you in different colors what the old one was and what the corrections were. So you don't have to scan and try to figure it out. It's very boldly addressed that you can see that. Again, acknowledging receipt of those changes or deletions or additions. So then they're all going to be disseminated that way. You know, that eventually everyone will have the manual right at their fingertips on their phone. So there's no question of having to come back to the station and look on, you know, if there's a question about anything. So we in the past have used to sign for everything, and then just, you know, we're killing forests by continually doing that. The training coordinator's office has reams of paper in there for every policy that's been issued, and this way nothing slips through the cracks. You have a new employee come, they are given the manual, we can put them out. There's no question about anybody not being kept in the loop on all our policies.
But they have to acknowledge that they've read them. There's no exam or that.
So
or
in the acknowledgement of the policy, there's no exam, but there's another component of the Lexipol, which is called the DBTs, the daily DTBs, daily training bulletins. And once all the policies are out, unlike Police One that does generic training, maybe on anti-bias or something, these daily training bulletins are just specifically targeted to our policies.
Right.
So it's a scenario of questions with a question, and it also produces to us their scores, whether they have passed. And it's not to be utilized against them for punitive reasons, but it's also for our purposes to make sure that they're reading these policies and understanding them. So this is something that we have not started doing yet because we don't want to do it until the policies are all distributed.
Right.
So, but that's another little checks and balance.
Yeah, Maria?
Chief, could I ask a question? So when you say that the officers read and acknowledge the policy, that acknowledgement is known to you electronically? I'm just trying to visualize.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up here so I can just read to you what it says. But yes, it's known to us, myself, John, the training coordinator, as the administrators, and whoever else if we chose to allow access to that in the department. I'm just trying to find if I can tell you what it says at the end here.
Well, that you'll be able to see that unless
I
you.
don't know if I will either because I
That's
don't have
not
any
issued out.
outstanding ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
I
okay.
don't.
It's
Yeah, I'm
okay. I was
sorry.
just wondering sort of how it, like who sees the,
Yeah.
who sees the acknowledgement and how is that record's kept electronically that that has happened?
Not
You
only
know,
do we see it, but we can also get notified if somebody hasn't acknowledged it in a certain amount of time, if I'm not mistaken also.
that's correct.
And we will also be notified if somebody's not doing their daily training bulletins. They'll be given a certain amount of time. Now, these aren't, an hour-long course. These are something that maybe they'll do for 15 minutes at the beginning of their shift, and they'll get a quick tutorial on one of the policies. And they'll get a scenario and they'll have to answer that scenario, and then they'll be told why it meets it or why it doesn't meet the policy. And then they can move on with the rest of their day. And then maybe the next day they'll get something else, or we might give them 3 or 4 throughout their work week to do. So that adds up to, an hour's worth of training in that week. If we were to do that 52 times, 52 weeks out of the year, that's 52 hours of training they've received on their policy manual. That's quite a bit. That's more than I've ever received on a policy manual ever.
Sure.
It is certainly worth its weight in gold to make sure that these guys, it's electronically notifying us if they're not in compliance, and it lets us know when they are in compliance. And if we notice somebody who's having difficulty in certain policies, we can pull them out. We can talk to them about it, see what the issue is, and retrain them. Or maybe that's an identification that we need to tweak the policy because something about it isn't right. And goes against maybe another policy or something like that. So that's our checks and balances also on our end. So
That's great. That's sophisticated. I'm more sophisticated, I'm sure, than most police forces have currently. Are we able to track the amount of time that officers spend doing the daily updates to count that as training, to sort of get credit for that training?
I think a 10, 15-minute for each one would be sufficient an amount to say. I don't think it breaks it down and tells you, but that's something I can find out. I had not heard that when we did the demonstration with them.
It might just
if
be
someone from
nice to be able
Lexipol is
to-
watching, I might.
might be nice to just be able to account for it if it's that, it sounds valuable. And then if, suppose it was 10 minutes and there were 50 a year, that really adds up.
Yeah, and just that in itself, I can find out though, but I think John was accurate in about the 10 to 15 minute time frame for each one. Some may be a little shorter, some may be a little longer, but if that was an approximate, we're better suited to be able to track the Police One training that we do, because that has a lesson plan with it. In addition, which I know we're not talking about training, so I won't get too off, but it does break it down, and it's an hour training, and it's not the training you can just sit and walk away. It's interactive. You have to be there with it. So that's a little easier to track for that type of training. This is meant just to be a quick refresher, just to keep those skills sharp and fresh with us, with our policies.
Thank you.
Do you ever have a situation where an officer reads a policy and then brings to your attention that they don't agree with something, or that something's not clear?
After it's implemented, not as much so, but during the course of reviewing it,
Developing it.
we go back and forth. We do get certain officers who are, if he's watching, Officer Ashley's very good at spell check and grammar. So kudos to him. He usually comes to me and I go, why did I not show it to him first? So.
And I assume your detective sergeant has some ideas and insights when these things happen too.
He does. And we, being our use of force instructor, with defensive tactics, we have utilized Detective Sergeant Guardino a lot in looking at these policies, also with the detective office, running the detective office and things of that nature. So, and that's where the content experts come into play.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about this? Just what I wanted to do here was kind of do a life history of a policy, so we can see how that works.
Helpful, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question, going back to the beginning of the process. Do you have like formal times or formal meetings or routine meetings where you're specifically addressing policy needs?
Well, right now, we much to probably Assistant Chief Riker and Officer Connor's dismay, we meet daily about policies and talk in the evenings about policies. Hence, I think his comment earlier about not talking to me late at night. So, but we do meet with our implementation person for Lexipol once a week or more if needed. And then we have a 2-hour block slated that we sit and discuss and go through with him. But it's like we said earlier, it's a continual ongoing thing. Tomorrow we have a meeting with Officer Lavin in regards to our license plate reader, because that's the program that he kind of got running. I have a meeting scheduled regards to the drone program. So in regards to that policy. So, and probably a few others that I'm not thinking of. So it's continual. There's not a day that goes by probably that we're not discussing policy.
And is that particularly heavy now because you're doing this transition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Once it's implemented, it won't be as often. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So does your Lexipol representative guide you in a process for that discussion? Like, do you follow a certain format when you're talking about the policies? Do they ask certain questions? Routine, like, do they follow a process to get you to talk about East Greenbush in your department specifically?
So what happened when we were fortunate enough to be able to get involved with them, we were also incorporated the implementation portion, which was nice. So they take all of our policies that we had from accreditation, and they put them basically side by side, and they did the heavy lifting initially and looked to make sure that we weren't contradictory with any state law or federal statutes or any best practices nationwide. And they did all of that. So when we sat down to look at together, we obviously know what our existing policy is, and then we see what their product was. So in that sense, yes, they did guide us to get to the initial starting point. But obviously it's all suggestions on their part, but minus those criteria we do need to follow.
And the reason why I'm asking is there something sustainable in this process that you're doing now daily, multiple times a day, that you might want to, that you see as what you could do as a best practice moving forward, like maybe once a week, twice a month, once a month?
Absolutely. And I anticipate that we will be getting updates, changes, deletions, all of the above from Lexipol, if not more than once a week, that will bring us to speak and sit down and discuss a certain policy, whatever it may be. We may not look back at our chaplain policy for a year, but we will probably be revisiting use of force and restraints and that more regularly.
Right. Okay.
Domestic violence is a big one that gets updated quite often. Different state laws take effect. If firearms are seized out of a domestic violence incident, now there's state law that says how those firearms can be returned, if at all, what you have to do with them when you take them in. So recently, I know that was added to our domestic violence policy, and it references the state law that requires it to do that. So it's very helpful for us because short of having somebody full-time looking into all of these updates to the laws in real time, it's very difficult for us to keep up. And I think you'll probably find that's the complaint from every police department you ever talk to. So to have these guys doing it for us and automatically send an email out to us saying, hey, there's been an update to the policy, here it is, this is what it is, take a look at it, let us know, and we can say yes, approved, and then they'll add it to the policy and everybody gets it. And they get a notification saying there's been an update to this policy, please acknowledge the receipt and read it and acknowledge it, and boom, you're done. It's a no-brainer for us to utilize it this way.
And that ongoing support is part of your contract, correct?
Yes.
I'm sure that the police department did a fine job before this, but it sounds like the contract with Lexipol has really enriched and made a deeper professionalism and standardization of policy. Is that would you say that's?
I agree.
Standardization for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're very proud of our policies as they existed. They may not be as pretty looking in a
Right.
package, but we certainly met all accreditation standards. And again, we're fortunate to have Jimmy Kondo have taken that task on per town supervisor's direction, and being obviously knowing that he did a very good job, the fact that he's been asked to go and do assessments for other agencies. And it's an ongoing process. Even with that, that doesn't go away. It's still continual, where he's getting samples and pulling samples, and I'm drawing a blank on what the other words is, templates of different and incident calls and things to that nature to substantiate our accreditation standards. So even though Lexipol may have more policy than accreditation standards, we're still obligated to fulfill those standards. So I think our department, even not having been accredited, was up to snuff and doing a good job with those that existed. Lexipol has just broadened as well as helped streamline things. And but I think we're in a good spot with our policies.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
the chief is very persuasive when she talks, but truthfully, all kidding aside, one of her most persuasive arguments was why we need Lexipol. And she and I talked about it. She's a new chief. She wants to review the policy. She wants to put her own stamp on things. But at the end of that conversation, the only thing I could think of is, why did we wait so long? Because it really, as you can see from what we're doing here and the format and all that, it really, and when you hear John talk about the ins and outs of having to deal with change and flux in these policies, this is an anchor that really is worth its weight in gold. So
Get lost in a shuffle for sure.
Yeah,
Good.
Chief can sell me on a lot of things, but this took 2 minutes because it really did make sense, and she made a good argument. So
Well, we're very grateful, because I think having gotten this a leg up, it is a process. They say it usually takes about a year, depending, how much staffing. We don't have someone just dedicated to do this. So I'm proud of the department, how much we've accomplished so far, and that we're under the year mark and have already started putting out policies with Lexipol. And I think it's going to be a huge benefit with this executive order too, you'll see. So
Thank you.
I think so too. Any other questions about the policies themselves, how they're made, how they're tested? Okay. If anything comes to mind, just jump in with it.
Yeah.
The next thing I want to do is, Tina and I talked about this. We want to review some policies. We don't want to review them all. I think Tina kind of convinced me. I was more of a mind that the policies would be a kind of very important part of the recommendations we would make. But Tina, and in this one case, she turns out to be right. Who
knew?
Imagine that. But she made the point that training is probably something that would feed more into the recommendations that we would make in a plan than policies. So what we talked about was taking this list that I sent out, and as a group picking 4 policies, and we each read them for the next meeting. We really try to master them to see what's there, what the nuances are, and then at the next meeting we would discuss with the nature of policies, because I think other than John and Elaine, we don't have any experience. During the accreditation thing, I asked the chief for policies from time to time, and I would read some of it. And I don't want to say it was Greek to me, because it wasn't. I mean, it's in the English language, so I can read it and understand the words, but they're like every other genre of writing or publishing. There's a kind of standard voice to it. There's a language and terminology to it. So, and I think the discussion I want to have now is, if we're going to take 4 policies, given the nature of what our assignment is here, what would be the 4 policies that we should look at? And I would start by arguing this bias-based policing is probably extremely relevant and probably use of force. But if other people think differently, we can go somewhere else. But what are your thoughts on what are the right kinds of policies? One of the things that was interesting to me in the guide was that and I don't think this is a problem for us, but they put a pretty heavy emphasis on recruitment and selection. For example, that on the one hand, you want to pick good character people to be police officers. And to East Greenbush's police department credit, for the 5 years I've been here and Tina's been here, every interview we do with cops for police positions do include bias-based policing questions. We do ask about that. We ask if you have any, if there were any biases you had that through the act of policing you no longer have. And I will tell you on that one, John Reicher's the only one who ever answered that question. So I won't go into his answer, but it was a great answer. And it was the first time somebody conceded, because you're in a job interview and you don't want to say, I had problems with an ethnic group or something like that. So the department has always had those questions in our interviews, but I was just taken by the emphasis on recruitment and selection in the guide. So, what do you want to look at? If we say use of force and bias-based policing,
I'd like to hear what some of the other committees members' thoughts are. I'd be curious to see what they're thinking.
Yeah. Well, and there's some, like, for example, officer-involved shootings and deaths. In light of the ideological arguments that led to this executive order, that might seem obvious, but I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge issue for our guys. It's not that it's not important.
Let me put the list on the screen in case
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah. Why don't you do that?
I mean, given the assignment, I mean, so many of these I found so very interesting and wanted to know more about. But given the assignment, I guess a couple of the ones that I looked at, use of force and bias, were definitely ones, yes, to look at. Another one I was interested in was crisis intervention, in terms of the community policing aspect. So crisis intervention, and again, I'm just throwing these out. I know we'll probably come up with a lot of ideas and have to narrow them down. The other one I was interested in, that I don't think it, just again in terms of the community policing task before us, was speech expression and social networking. Because I think we've seen a lot of things nationally around that, and I don't know, I'm just interested in it. We've seen a lot of I don't know if this, I assume this speech expression and social networking has to do with our police force, those as at
I can pull that up, Maria. I'm going to pull it up and tell you what our purpose and scope says for it. Just if that, at least, I mean, obviously we were more than happy to send these to you, but just for this purpose right now.
Sure.
This policy, for the purpose and scope of speech expression and social networking, is the policy is intended to address issues associated with the use of social networking sites and provides guidelines for the regulation and balancing of member speech and expression with the needs of the East Greenbush Police Department. This policy applies to all forms of communication, including but not limited to film, video, print media, public or private speech, and use of all internet services, including the web, email, file transfer, remote computer access, news services, social networking, social media, instant messaging, blogs, forums, video, and other file sharing sites. Nothing in this policy is intended to prohibit or infringe upon any communication, speech, or expression that is protected under law. So that's like the beginning. That's the purpose and scope, if that gives a better understanding.
Yeah, that helps. So I'm still interested in that. Thank you. Thank you. That
Okay.
helped. And so
And
I was
more than welcome, if there's other ones that come up, we're more than welcome to send you those blurbs too, or the policies.
okay. So those were a couple that interested me beyond the use of force and the bias was the crisis intervention incidents and the speech expression and social networking.
Okay.
And can you do the same thing with crisis intervention, Chief?
On it, 408, certainly.
I'd help you out, Chief, but for some reason mine's not loading up.
I had trouble earlier, but I got it now. So let's see here. So let's see. I say I have it, but it's still spinning. All right, the crisis intervention. Let's see. All right. So this one says for crisis intervention incidents. Why is that cut off? This policy provides guidelines for interacting with those who may be experiencing a mental health or emotional crisis. Interaction with such individuals has the potential for miscommunication and violence. It often requires an officer to make difficult judgments about and I apologize because for some reason the last part is cut off here. My computer looks like it's freezing.
I got it here. A person's mental
Okay.
state and intent in order to effectively and legally interact with the individual.
There you go.
Thank you. So I'm still interested in that one if others are.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Ingrid and Robin, does that sound like one you'd want to look at?
Yeah, I always love looking at the crisis care system and the intersection of mental health crisis and addiction crisis and policing. So for sure.
Yeah, and Robin? Is Robin muted?
I don't hear her.
Robin, do you want to put a comment in the chat if we can't hear you?
Dina, why don't you go back to the full screen?
Okay.
Or Taylor or whoever's.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. Okay.
while you're doing that, I noticed in the standards when I was looking at the standards, there was and I don't see a policy. I don't see a policy in the list that you sent out, Jack. There was something about health of persons in custody. Does that ring a bell, Chief? No.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to think. You saw that. Where are you saying?
I saw it in the standards list that index that first came out. It was called Health of Persons in Custody, but I don't think we have a policy necessarily about that. If this is the list that we're looking
It would
at.
probably fall under custody of adults and juveniles. It may fall under just because those are everyone falls under one of those categories.
Okay, I was interested in that as well.
Did you know what number accreditation standard it was?
It was 43.
Did you see the accreditation standard next to it?
40. Well, it was 43.8 in the.
Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay.
And it just raised a question for me. Do we have something that addresses that?
Yes, I'm trying to just find what number it is.
If there's an accreditation standard, then there's a policy that goes with it.
There is.
Might not be in Lexipol.
Oh, I got it. I got
Or
it.
it's called something different.
Or,
And
or
that's
it's
why
called
I'm,
something else, yes.
I see.
and that's why we have a whole section in Lexipol on custody. So I just am trying to see which one it would fall under. And we have a temporary custody of adults, a temporary custody of juveniles. And there's it would fall, without reading them all thoroughly right this second. It
Yeah,
would fall under one of those.
I guess I was just thinking in terms of, you know, the community policing and task at hand, or the things we've seen nationally, that was an area that was of interest, but I see it's not on the list you sent out, Jack. So, or it
Well,
doesn't.
it might have been taken off. I mean, I threw everything in but the kitchen sink on, and then some people looked at it and said, you know, maybe this isn't relevant, but we can find it. But of
We
course,
don't have.
I
Yeah,
would venture a guess to say that it probably wasn't taken off. It's probably included in a Lexipol policy somewhere that we've included on this list, or,
Mhm.
you know, so.
Okay.
yeah.
What was
Well,
it's
what was
not-
the number standard you had? 43,
40,
you said?
43.8.
So
And again,
the
not
temporary,
critical,
go ahead.
not critical,
sorry.
just another area that
No.
I thought might fit into our task.
Yeah. But first off, let me check this. Robin, are you okay there? We can't hear you, or you're not muted, are you? Taylor, do you see anything? We did get your chat message that crisis
Can you hear us,
intervention is
Robin?
good.
Yeah,
Can you hear
everything's
us?
good on my end, on our end.
Yeah, are you there?
Yeah.
Robin, can you hear us? No. Do you want to try again? You know, log off, reboot, and come back. I don't know if I'm talking to Robin.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can hear us.
Yes.
Okay. So the crisis intervention incidents is good with you.
It is. Absolutely. And I've been trying to say that for a while.
Yeah, we had you pegged for that, but it
goes
is
into-
nice to hear it in your own voice.
to the whole, everything that we've been, with the work that we're supposed to be doing, I believe. So, yeah.
Okay, so what that means is we have agreement on 3.
Yeah.
Use of force, bias-based policing, and crisis intervention incidents.
So if I could just add a comment in, that
Do we
guidance,
all freeze?
the guidance document that the governor developed gave 4 real areas of focus, and we may or may not want to review policies that
I
fit.
think we all froze.
I'm
No?
okay.
I'm good.
Hear me?
Chief froze.
Chief froze. So the 4 areas, the first one is what functions should the police perform? The second area is employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies, fostering community-oriented leadership culture and accountability, and recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. So we may or may not want to look at policies that fall into those areas.
Yeah. When the discussion, Tina, of that what are the functions of a police department, I thought was pretty weak in that document. I don't think they focused on a specific kind of direction there. Doesn't mean that we can't go after something.
Would it be useful to review the mission statement and goals of the police department to address that first issue, Tina?
That's a good idea.
I could just add something to, roles of the police has been something that has obviously come up in this last year. I think that, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the governor. I would never do that, but I'm going to assume that this has to do with, whether or not we should be involved in certain types of calls anymore. There was a big push that, we shouldn't be involved in mental health incidences because they all, the processes that, or the thought process is that, if it goes bad, then it always results in something horrible happening with the police involved. I think that those are the types of things they're looking for us to address. Should we be involved in neighbor disputes when that technically most of the time, if somebody's having a property line dispute, it's not a police issue. That's something for, a civil court to decide. But often people look to us to advise them of that. Is that something that we're going to do, or are we going to say, sorry, you got to call another entity for that? I think that's where they were going with what is the roles of the police and whether we should be involved in certain types of calls anymore, or if we should continue doing what we're doing here in East Greenbush because everything's great, or do we need to change something?
Yeah, I think John, I think you make a great point. And I think, and you helped me think through what bothered me about that section, is I really felt like that section was trying to lead us down this path of saying, the police need to be confined to a certain role. That the defund the police, which was the worst phrase ever, because obviously you can't do that. But in New York City, for example, they have, they want to take 3% of the police budget and put it with mental health agencies. Of course, in East Greenbush, you guys are the mental health agency as well as the police. So when the functions of the police or the role of the police, I really think was trying to lead us down a path to create a narrower definition of what police do in a community. And I just don't feel like we have that luxury to follow that yellow brick road. But so Tina, with what you just said, does that lead you to, Maria's idea about the mission statement is that's an interesting idea. If you guys have,
that's a great suggestion, but I also think that if we look at some of these policies, we might see that they do address these 4 areas as well, whether intentionally or unintentionally. That these 4 areas, for example, the policy and speech expression and social networking might fall under that category of what functions should the police perform, because in the guidance document, and again, it's a guidance document. It's not. It's not a roadmap. We don't have to follow it. They're talking about relationships and procedural justice. So we might find that these policies fall into multiple categories.
Would community relations be something we want to look at then? The policy on community relations as well?
Yeah, that was one I was looking at.
Let's see, let me tell you what that purpose and scope is here. It certainly sounds like it fits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The purpose of this policy is to provide guidelines for community relationship building. Additional guidance on community relations and outreach is provided in other policies. And it lists other policies like patrol, chaplain's policy, suspicious activity reporting, hate crimes, limited English. So a lot of times you'll see in the policies the reference on another one, and it may just because there's one little line in there, but sometimes there's a lot of content. So until you delve into it, it's hard to say how they link. So it's kind of a one sentence guidelines for community relationship building.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay though. We could take a look at that. And Tina, when you're talking about that, the guidance document talks about puts some emphasis on recruitment, and
I feel the same way. The recruitment and selection was really important in the guidance document. The problem we have is we get a civil service list, and quite frankly, because of my opinion, what's happened nationally and the way the reputation of police departments in general has taken a hit, and also because you can go to Hudson Valley, get a 2-year degree, and go into cybersecurity, criminal justice degree, and go into cybersecurity and make more money and never be in danger. Only 10 people passed the civil service exam in Rensselaer County. And some of them were, they were eyeballing North Greenbush or Skodak or East Greenbush. We have two ways to recruit, the civil service list and then lateral transfers. And so our hands are tied in recruitment. And our department does a great job of background checks and those kinds of things. So the selection process, we're pretty good at. But it's not, there's this idea that police departments could go out and recruit, like 6 African-American officers, or my pet peeve, which is they say that a police department should look like the community it polices. So I would like to have more women on the police force. There wasn't a single woman on the civil service list. So you can, in the abstract, discuss recruitment and selection, but the reality of it is it's very, very limited. We hope for a good lateral application, and we get them, but then you get some that are, tier 1, tier 2, and we can't afford them. If they're tier 5 or 6, we have a better shot. So I agree. The guidance booklet really made a point about recruitment and selection, but I don't know. Tell me if you disagree.
We can certainly, we participate in community events. We do our cookout with a cop events. We do our cornhole with a cop, which I was bummed got canceled because of COVID. But we do have officers up at the basketball games. We can make a more concerted effort to have informational, or maybe the Rensco website available for them. Just because sometimes it's just a matter of people don't know where to go for the information, or some people are just in that little extra effort. If you put something in their hand, then maybe they'll go on and look at it. But things like that. So maybe, I think Jack and I had talked about this once a while ago, maybe, when they have a community day at Hudson Valley or something to that effect, setting up a booth over there and, branching outside of East Greenbush, because our population is who our population is. And, so that does limit us reaching out to other minorities that may not, go to school here or have come work in town. But, we are limited by the civil service. And I can tell you from years ago, where there was 100 and some people on the list, everybody wanted the job. And like Jack said, now, we had 10 candidates to choose from.
Might that be an area where we could make recommendation for further action, then just look at it and then say, this is a sort of our reality now, but we've got some ideas.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the chief's idea of like participating in career days and things like that at the high school at Hudson Valley, I think those probably should be recommendations.
Yeah. And we've done the YMCA. Shannon has had us in there before for different events over there, which has been nice. The library years ago. So things like that definitely could be recommendations this committee puts forth. And also, just in honesty, it boils down to competitiveness with contracts, too. So that's, something Jack doesn't want, to talk.
So everybody should want to work in East Greenbush.
But, for salaries and, they're going to go, if they truly want to do policing, they're going to go where the money is. So that's a fact nowadays, unless you're a homegrown person, like some of us, your loyalty is to East Greenbush, they don't have that loyalty. They're going to go elsewhere. So those are all factors that people don't realize that come into play when we're trying to hire.
But having expanded the discussion this far, Maria, if you want to look at recruitment and selection as a policy, we can do that. Let's see what we're saying now.
Yeah, let's see.
With an eye towards what we could say that would broaden that. Because it is I guess at first I was surprised at what an emphasis that was in the guidebook.
Yeah.
But then when you start to think of this stereotype of what's happened in the last year, you've got this guy who leans on George Floyd, and recruitment and selection becomes, don't pick guys like that to be police officers.
Right.
And to me, that at least in the way that Cuomo spoke about it publicly, was a very narrow-minded and, as far as I'm concerned, ill-informed view of recruitment and selection, because the reality is very, very different.
Yes, it is.
So, but we have, if we have three, the fourth, you and Maria, these all come from you, so your opinion should be very important here. Speech, expression, and social networking, recruitment and selection, and what was the other one? That
Community relations.
Community
community
relations.
relations, right?
You know,
So-
those are three that I think are, they're valuable to throw out there, but I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about them or has a preference for.
Yeah.
It sounded to me that recruitment and selection kind of almost will cover some community relation aspects too by doing outreach in a way. Does that, it almost touches on all of them. They're all related in a way.
Yeah. Speech, expression, and social networking is one of the most interesting titles on all of these pages. But when Chief read part of what that's about, I became a little less interested in it. So if it was, Maria, if you had a choice between, say, community relations and recruitment and selection, what would your preference be?
Probably, given the guidance document, the personnel recruitment, and try to, as Robin said, bring in some of that community relations.
Yeah.
If
Ingrid, Ingrid, do you have some thoughts on this? Community relations or recruitment and selection?
I feel like if your hands are tied as far as the recruitment and selection, which they kind of are, if you need someone who's like gone through the police academy and they pass the civil service test, like I don't know how, if it makes a lot of sense to spend a lot of time on that. I think I don't know, what do you think? Because that's
a good point.
Your job.
No, that's a good point.
I just want to give you a little bit more insight to the speech, expression, social networking. It's basically about prohibited speech, expression, and conduct, while you're working, on unauthorized endorsements and advertisements. So it sounds more exciting than it is. Whether you have to determine whether speech or conduct would negatively affect the efficiency of delivering our services. So to an extent, but it's not a very enticing, exciting policy to review. I'll just be honest. So, yeah, I think what I was thinking of was some of the behind the scenes things that we've seen that have come out maybe after there's been an incident, unfavorable incident, that then, people are saying, well, listen, this guy was no secret that he was on the force. Look at what he's been posting on Facebook for the last 5 years. That kind of thing was what I was more thinking about, and how it relates then to the community policing effort.
Right.
But we can let that go. And I do see, Ingrid's point about, if our hands are tied on the recruitment, I don't know if we need to. I guess I'm wondering if we're in the position of defending anything in this report or not, or we can just take it down the road we want to go. So community relations would be probably the area we might want to go.
I certainly think we can make our recommendations. We kind of just did about some, thoughts what we could do for recruiting, but doesn't mean we have to necessarily review the policy. Maybe there's other ones that, need to be reviewed more, and then we already know what our thoughts are for recruiting and understand. I mean, that's just my thought.
Community relations might be interesting because we're surveying that as well. You know, that the survey is going to collect a lot of data on that. My prediction is that this department's going to do really well on that, and I think the community relations is a strong suit of the East Greenbush Police Department. And I shouldn't say this in front of her, but especially since Elaine's been chief, the most popular decision that Tina and I were involved in as town board members was picking her as chief. I wish we'd known that like 3 months before we did it. It would have made it easier. But it really was the number of phone calls, and part of it was because Elaine is of the community. You know, she's been here and everybody went to high school with her. I think the entire town of East Greenbush went to high school with either Elaine or John. Okay.
Unless you're really old.
No, yeah, well, I know that feeling. But the truth is that people really related to it. Chris Lavin was a good chief, but he wasn't warm and fuzzy. And he wasn't somebody who sought opportunities, you know, to like
Different style, yeah.
Yeah, and music in the park, they do cone with a cop and they're handing out ice cream on a hot summer night while there's a concert going on. That's priceless. That's good stuff. And Elaine's done that till COVID. She was on fire with that. So
We'll get back up and running. I just pulled up the community relations policy, and I think you're going to really like this. Again, there's so many policies, I can't tell you every section in each one, but without looking, but this one specifically doesn't just list out our responsibilities. It lists out about surveys. The community relations coordinator should arrange for a survey of community members and department members to be conducted at least annually to assess the condition of the relationship between the department and the community. So, I mean, it's right on task with what we're doing.
yeah.
So, and there's more to it here about community and youth activities, information sharing, safety, education. So I think this is a good one that fits a lot of the points that were listed in the executive order.
So do we have 4?
So that would be 4.
That checks the box.
It does.
So from the Lexipol side, it would be number 300, use of force, 343, community relations, 401, bias-based policing, and 409, crisis intervention incident.
And just so you know, things get renumbered all the time with policies. So community relations is actually 341 now. You'll see on that when it comes.
Knock it off. Knock it off.
I know. And
right.
Crisis intervention is 408. So
I think those are 4 good
I
ones.
can't work like this.
Yeah.
I think those are 4 really good,
Yeah.
They're different, they're distinct, they cover a lot of different ground.
Yep.
I think they're really good.
So the question becomes, what are we going to do with them? If we all read them, Tina, do you share the screen with the rubric you came up with in an earlier life?
Okay, so, to standardize conversations, I think we've all used rubrics. And, I don't know police policies, but it looked like there was some standardization where there's a policy section number and a policy name. And, a 3-point rubric we could do is the content outstanding, thoroughly described, key terms, stakeholders, areas needing analysis and resolution are defined. 2 could be adequate, presents clear position. 1 would be deficient. And that's one way of thinking about it, is using some type of just a simple rubric where you read it through and you use your own judgment to give it some type of a score, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. I think it's a good way to frame a conversation.
I think it gives us that standard way of looking at it, that what are we looking for? We're looking thoroughly described, clear position. If you were, does that sound okay?
Yeah.
I think it sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really do. And
Yep.
so what we'll do is with these 4 policies, Tino, you'll email this again to everyone
Yes.
and print 4 of them, and let's do one for each policy, so that the next time, the next meeting, what we'll do is we'll discuss those policies. And I think what the discussion can take a number of turns, one of which is what we learned about reading police policy. I mean, you know, as I said, it's its own genre of writing. And then we can talk about each of the 4.
You're good at making this sound exciting, Jack.
Yeah, I hear you.
So
But-
just, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to just be mindful of time. We do have somebody who's entered our waiting room
Yeah,
from the public.
7:15.
So we can admit that person and continue the conversation?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the other thing we'll do is, I think we as we talk about each policy, the question becomes, is there anything, as we read these policies, do we see policies as a fertile ground for recommendations? In other words, if you read the community relations policy and there's things missing, glaring things missing, do we, when we get to the point of creating a plan and making recommendations, do we look at some of these policies carefully and go that way? But what we're going to do next week also is try to make the bridge from policies to training. So the other thing to keep in mind when you're reading these is, you know, what kind of training would be appropriate. Chief and John can give us kind of what training happens now. We can look at the Police One stuff, some of the courses. And because I think Tina was right that in the training, a number of recommendations should come out of our thoughts about what kind of training might be necessary. Now, I'm going to fight against all of them because we can't afford training, but in fairness, if there's training we need it. And so we'll have to look at that. So anybody have anything to add to that, or any questions on what we can do with discuss doing these policies? We'll use the rubric. Go ahead.
As far as the training portion, John and I'll come prepared to share with you for each of these policies what our department has been doing, and
That'd
anything.
be great.
And whether it's hands-on or online, and we can explain to you, you know, how long we can kind of get an idea now that we know what policies, how long we've been doing certain trainings for. So we can come with all that information for you. So that should help expedite and answer some questions.
Good.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So I have a question and a thought about, on top of what Jack was just talking about, the where the suggestions for the changes and the reinvention, since this is, you know, reform and reinvention, is it going to be an opportunity to also look outside of the police agency, the department, to look at other recommendations of community collaboration, county collaboration for some of the addressing some of the issues? That's going to, I'm just trying to be clear, that's going to be something we're going to be looking at, right, as part of.
Absolutely.
So we can look at data
like,
and other models of other programs. Maybe that will be able to.
And Robin.
And I think we touched on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chief.
No, I think when we touch briefly to that point, Robin,
yeah,
is how Rensselaer County Mental Health wants to get that website up and running. You know, that's something that we may not be in place yet, but that's something we can put in our package deal. So at the end, that this is where we're gearing towards once that's in place, and they're supposed to be supporting the funding, which I know the town supervisor is happy to hear as far as that goes, to get that up and running. Then it's something that all of our agencies will benefit from. So. you know, that as well as the
That's
mobile
all gonna
crisis,
come
things
into
like that.
play and the final recommendations, the stuff. Okay.
And Robin,
Right.
the
And that's
one
where
thing, go ahead, Chief.
that's where the policies are so fluid. So when that is in place, our policy would incorporate that and we would adjust it accordingly. Sorry, that was the rest.
Okay. And all I was going to say, Robin, is get plenty of rest because you're going to write that part of the plan. So.
I am happy to.
No, you'd be the one to do that. Absolutely.
You know, one of the things I was going to ask if it would be useful for this committee, especially if we do start talking about crisis intervention, is, you know, in the past I've looked at a lot of different programs. Some of the programs that were even mentioned in the guideline booklet I have some familiarity with. If I collect some information, some data, and get that out to you guys, I don't know, I want to do it prematurely or if it won't be useful, but I'm, you know a lot about the open dialogue program that came out of Norway. I know I worked really closely with the CIT training program in Miami-Dade County with Judge Leifman. I have, you know, number of these, the one that was in, that's in Austin, Texas. So if I can bring any of that additional information, some other ideas of how other counties in Florida structured their CIT, their crisis response programs with a county and stuff like that, I can add some information when
we will come to that.
Okay.
There's no doubt. And having you on this committee, Robin, has always been a good idea, but that stuff is
Great.
It would
Happy to
take us
share it,
forever
yeah.
to get where you already are. So
Good.
okay, any other thoughts on and one of the questions I was going to ask is how are we going to approach training as a subject, but I think the chief kind of nailed it. If we can take these 4 policies and talk about, you know, get some information on training that's been done, maybe look at the Police One training modules on these, we can create the link between policies and training. All right, before I go to public comment, is there anything anyone wants to bring up, say, clarify, vent, anything you want?
One quick thing, I am unavailable next Tuesday night at 6 o'clock.
Oh, I want a note from your mother. Can everybody else do next Tuesday at 6? We can take a week off if you want. The next night's a town board meeting. I'm always.
You may want to with the policies, to give it ample time or move it to later because, you know, to really read them and without pulling them up, some of them are lengthy. I don't know if these ones are. I know our use of force one has a lot of content.
So why don't
it
we,
may not be.
Tina, can you make it on the 26th?
Yes,
as far as you know?
Yes, next Tuesday is my son's birthday, so you know I'd like to have dinner and make him a cake.
Which one?
Dylan's going to be 18.
Oh no! Oh my God, is he like 6'8" yet?
He's 6'2".
Oh my gosh!
I can remember when he was like 5'2". So that boy grows like a weed. That's cool though. That's cool. Okay, so we'll say the 26th at 6 p.m. will be the next meeting. And Chief, can you send out some of that training stuff?
I will send out. Do you want the training right now as well as the policies, or just the policies first?
Send the policies out, and then
they'll go out first thing tomorrow to everybody.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll go from there.
I think that's probably enough to start with to digest.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Elaine, you mentioned that some of the policies have reference to additional policies
Correct.
in it. Will we be missing things if we're not reading those other policies?
Well,
or should we request it, or
we can, depending on what they are, we can go through like we did with this if there's references, and I'll try to look ahead, and if there's something that I think you definitely should have, we'll send it with it.
Okay, thank you.
Along, just as long as that's okay with the rest of the committee, instead of having to wonder what it's saying.
Yeah, and next meeting, if there's others, you know, if people found references that they'd be interested in, we can do that
Absolutely.
as well. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, David, do you want to talk? You're at the moment you're muted, but
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Something wrong with my video.
It's not the same experience, David, if we can't see you.
Here we go.
There we go. There we go.
First of all, I'm tired of being the only person that attends these public meetings. Period. I gotta appreciate you guys being very transparent about this and being open to the public, whatever. One of the comments I have to make is that as a community, respect fosters respect, and that goes for the police department and the community. It's a two-way street, all right? And I think we need more respect from the community as far as that's concerned. This might be a golden opportunity to go forward in the future with interaction with the public and the police department, and not have to be anything having to do with Governor Cuomo's, I call it edict. What I'd like to suggest is possibly going forward is have either a semi-annual, at the most a quarterly, because you people have to have lives. You need to have your own time. But have some sort of a in-person public meeting, a panel, whatever the case may be. One place might be is the public library. Another place might be is one of the school district auditoriums. At the very least, maybe a Zoom meeting. Just as an interaction, a more periodic interaction with the police department at large. That might foster a lot better relationships. I know the police department does a very good job on their Facebook page, but I think we need to go a little bit further than that, because I'm not sure how many people actually even looks at those pages. If there's any metrics as far as that's concerned. The other thing is, as far as the news blast for the survey, when it goes out, what I might suggest is that you might include links to the Zoom meeting or the board, the actual meeting tonight and last night, the last meeting or meeting before that. That might give them a point of reference to what the survey is all about. I still am very, very concerned about the apathy in the town of East Greenbush about anything, not only this. And you know what I'm talking about, Mr. Conway.
I do, but I disagree.
Well, I'd like to see the metrics.
David, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, there were 120 people in the courtroom every town board meeting, and it spilled over into fights and arguments in the parking lot. I know I'm not the objective source, but I believe that people trust the way we're doing business. And I don't think, I mean, apathy could be part of it, but I think for the most part, we have been very successful in turning the town's finances around. We have been very successful in reinventing civil discourse in our local government. And I hear from a lot of people about how we're doing or what we're doing. And when Tina and I were campaigning last year, it was almost like a victory tour. People were expressing a great deal of satisfaction with the way we're doing this. Now, the Zoom stuff cuts into the audience. There's no doubt about it. And maybe this being a political year where two town board seats are up, could bring some friction or attention to the town board meetings. But the town board meetings in the town of East Greenbush used to be packed, and they were an embarrassment to this town. People talked about us all over Rensselaer County and the Capital Region. We were famous for dysfunction. So Dave, I know that I'm not the objective source because I'm kind of blowing my own horn. But the truth is if you saw the comparison historically, the casino turned everything around, and those meetings were an issue like that comes up again, we'll see everybody. But I don't disagree, David. I wish we had a full courtroom, and I wish I was spending more of my days answering questions from residents. So I do take your point, but I do think historical context is important.
I agree with you. With the casino project, there was a lot of people that came out, including me, in support of not having the casino
Yeah.
in our town for a lot of different reasons. But I think that people have become apathetic overall for a lot of different things. They feel their voice may not be being heard. But I think that I'm not criticizing you or the town board. I'm just saying that people need to be engaged with their town government.
I agree.
Not every day of the week, not every week of the year, but they need to be engaged. They need to see what's going on. And,
Yeah.
and one way of doing that is either reading the town agenda before it happens and making note of what's been going on. And that's over and above what's going on with this meeting here tonight. But it needs to occur. And
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
But overall, you guys are doing a great job. It's some things I agree with, some things I don't. But I really appreciate the transparency that you guys are making an effort to do.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else, Dave? You're good?
That's all I have time. Thank you.
Okay. So, does anybody have any final thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I guess we'll have to get Tina, we'll have to send stuff to Roger and Aaron with a little bit of an explanation.
Yes, and they can watch the recording.
Yeah. Something they just might. So, all right, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Going to work.
Have a good week.
Good night, everybody. Have a good week.